Good morning, everybody, or good lunchtime or good afternoon, depending where you're listening to, which part of the world you're coming from. And I am not Stephen Machua, as you can imagine. Stephen is actually at the high-level meeting venue, trying to get a quiet location for having a chat with Patson. So apologies for that, but hopefully he'll come online in the next few minutes from myself. My name is Paul Shaw. I'm steering group lead with the Network of African Youth for Development, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome a good friend of mine, Patson Malisa from South Africa, who I will leave to introduce himself and describe what HLM2 is about. Thank you, Patson.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good day to everyone. My name is Patson Malisa. I am the president of the Organization of African Youth. I am also attending the high-level meeting on the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, popularly known as HLM2, which is currently being hosted in Nairobi, Kenya. It is a gathering of nations from around the world who are partners to this mechanism that is steered by the United Nations Development Program, steered towards monitoring the frameworks, or should I say the progress made within incorporating development policies and declarations made within UN spaces amongst member states. So basically what this meeting is doing is it's recapping on the progress made thus far since the last HLM, which happened in Mexico, and tracking on to find out what commitments were made and how far did they go in terms of achieving those commitments and the way forward. I happened to have participated yesterday in the youth aspect of it. There was a youth forum where I was speaking on behalf on the topic of localizing sustainable development, and we're going to be taking that conversation further within the interministerial meeting on the 1st of December, where we will be discussing women and youth incorporation into the development framework of the partnership. So basically, that's the crux of the matter. There are various constituencies that are represented, from parliament to private sector to your ministers, as I've mentioned earlier. So basically, that's basically what HLM is.
Well, thank you, Patson, and that nicely opens us to the topic of the conversation today, which is about the use of high-level political forums, and I think from the high-level forum that took place in New York in July, and one wonders whether these forums are just set up by the establishment to all agree with each other that yes, we're making good progress, and then just go back to their rooms and have a good Scotch whiskey, and in fact nothing happens as a result of it, or in fact some positive progress does come out of these meetings. So just from the experience you've had so far, do you think these forums are a waste of time or not?
From my experience, I will say that they are not a waste of time, because of the fact that if you want to do anything with regards to multilateral partnerships, there will be a need for people to come together and converse. And many of the times when you make these conversations happen, each one comes in with their own constituencies, grievances, as well as expectations. And one of the problems that we tend to have is that there's always a group that seems to be in the majority that expects certain things to be resolved immediately. Unfortunately, that is not always what happens in diplomacy. In fact, the whole concept behind it was to exhaust as far possible the ideas that come to the front so that conflict would be the last resolution. If we look at the United Nations framework, the whole reason why it was established was to make sure that there's never a world war again. And as a supplement to that came the issue of development. Now that there hasn't been much of a threat in terms of world conflict, there has been much expectation with regards to development. And unfortunately, those mechanisms were not there prior to the United Nations. And it's taken centuries for civilization to come to this point. And I think it is essential that we also exercise a bit of patience and also a bit of understanding as to how far we have come, and also give appreciation to the fact that we also have a part to play in making sure that we can bring in the right types of changes to the system, and also reform it in a way that does not necessarily destroy the purpose to which it was created, and that is to make sure that the world remains stable. And it's a very ambitious task, but someone has to do it. And unfortunately, diplomacy, as quiet and as nice as it sounds, has a lot of loud voices shouting at it, and somehow it has to always remain civil. So it's a heavy plot to play.
Thank you. So what I understand from what you're saying there is a very large political content to these sort of meetings, in terms of world leaders actually meeting each other. I mean, this is one of the vital parts of these United Nations get-togethers. These leaders meet together and they actually share positive outcomes rather than actually moan about the issues facing their country, which is probably a good way of approaching these sort of meetings. But obviously our concern is with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're almost a year in now since they started on the 1st of January 2016. I mean, I just get a feeling that not a lot of progress has been made in these 11 months. I might be wrong. I'm quite happy to be told I'm completely wrong. But in your opinion, do you think progress has been made? How effective are these forums for actually tackling the implementation of the SDGs?
I think at the moment, especially, I'll speak from an African perspective because I'm more familiar with that than anywhere else. In terms of the African idea of sustainable development, we are in a position where our markets and even the way we trade are going through seismic shifts because of the fact that the world has retracted from buying our resources in the volumes that they used to. So we have to resort to different ways to trade and different ways to collect revenue. And that is causing a strain, obviously, on how leaders then approach the issue of sustainable development, because now they're having to look at what are the short-term effects of, let's say, for example, opening up borders to trade amongst one another, of which would then sometimes stifle local business because of the fact that now a better product might come from another country and stuff like that. And, you know, these type of issues are causing quite a bit of a strain with regards to sustainable development in Africa. Another issue is the fact that there seems to be a gap between civil society and government. And I think this is something that people the world over can agree with. And that is, there seems to be this idea that civil society must always be with the finger pointing and saying, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing that right, or, you know, and yet when it comes to the issue of development, there is need for us to understand that it's not going to be the success of a government policy alone. It's going to be the effort of everyone incorporated to come in and contribute meaningfully with regards to policy content, with regards to also the implementation mechanisms. That's why many a times government, when they see that there isn't enough capacity within the instrument to deliver they outsource it through either tendering or other forms of supply chain management. And we as civil society need to understand that we also have a role to play where we can act as an organ of state with that in that regard. So I think with regards to the progress, it's really just a matter of just realigning with one another, understanding why we are here in the first place.
Right. Thank you, Patson. I noticed that you presented at the African Youth Forum yesterday at the high-level meeting. Can you tell us what that was about, and do you think that the youth are well represented at this meeting in Nairobi?
It was a global youth forum, a lot of African youth, but quite a few others. Yeah, it was quite a few others, other parts of the world that were there as well. I got to speak at the third session with regards to localizing sustainable development, moving it from the text in international treaties to actual implementation on the ground. So I looked at it from a policy perspective. I also looked at it from the role that youth would play in that regard. And basically the crux of my message was, if we can get a collaboration between private entities, civil society, and local government, things are a lot easier to work with, because the budget of a municipality, we can say, is much easier to pass than at impact than a national budget, because there's a macro effect to national budgets, whereas with municipal budgets, that's the people's money, literally. That belongs to the people who live within that city. So it's essential that civil society makes good use of that, makes good use of the fact that you've got councillors, you've got aldermen, representatives who you can call at any time and engage with. I know in some other countries, they might not necessarily have it in that form, but local government still is a very important part of how things are run in those type of situations. So it can be engaged. The principle remains the same, but the methods of engagement might differ. So I was basically trying to say, let the principle remain consistent. And as far as representation at the Youth Forum yesterday, there was quite a significant representation from many parts of the world. Sad to say that from my own country, it was only me. Although I'm proud of that, I'm very happy to have represented South Africa. But it is very essential that we have more people being given an opportunity to come to these type of events. Definitely.
Well, thanks. Of course, South Africa couldn't have a finer representative than yourself, Patson. So they're doing very well from your presence, I would suggest. And interesting to note that the private enterprise and local governments and community build organizations, NGOs, need to work together more effectively, which is something we've been trying to encourage with our initiative, for our teams to basically develop strong stakeholder networks. And maybe we've been focusing too much on the local government side of things and not on the private enterprise side of things. So maybe that's something that we need to push a bit more as far as our initiative is concerned. But the purpose of the HLM2, and I quote it here, is to amplify the positive impact of development cooperation over the next 15 years. In fact, it's only 40 and a bit years now. So how do you think this might work for rural communities in Africa?
I think, especially with regards to people who are offline, rural communities in Africa, this development initiative has got a mechanism that has been put in place called CPDE. I do not know the full stance for that. All I remember is the acronym because they literally pushed it down our throats yesterday, which was good. But basically, what CPDE does is they reach out to local communities and they try to create a monitoring mechanism from which they find out how is government interacting with the people, how are development initiatives or development indicators being monitored in that regard. Of course, many people will look at me and then say, but I've never heard of this. Of course, because it's relatively new. And at the same time, it's also quite small. One of the problems that is being had both at NGO and at international government level is resources. Resources are quite hard to come by, but budget allocations are also very hard to appropriate, especially at that level, because you've got issues such as peacekeeping, you have emergency situations and all the likes where governments might not necessarily be in a position to assist, but then now international organizations then need to come to the front and then fill the blanks in that regard. So many of these initiatives that try and help this partnership to happen are rather underfinanced. And that's one of the things that this partnerships meeting here is trying to advocate for the increased investment into the mechanisms that have been put in place through the steering committee, the likes of CPDE and all the others. And I actually proposed yesterday that there must be a youth working group also initiated through this that can help to keep the momentum of engaging with the youth, so that it's not only just, if we can just coin the phrase, the elitist who are given an opportunity to engage with this platform, but rather let it also have an impact on the people who might not necessarily know that this platform partnership even exists.
I did a quick look on the internet, Patson, and apparently it stands for Civil Society Organizations Partnership for Development Effectiveness.
That's right. So there we go.
So it's a lot easier to say CPDE, to be honest, but
yes.
Stephen's just actually messaged me to say he's in a quiet place. So let me just see if we can get him online. Just no problem. Please bear with me for a minute. Let me see if I can sort this out. So hopefully he will appear at some point. But I suppose just connected to what you were talking about there, Patson, and we talk about the forum, of course. They actually contribute to global partnerships for implementation of SDGs. And of course, you've just said that you think there should be a youth partnership set up specifically to promote the SDGs. Oh, hello, Stephen. Hello, Stephen. It's nice to have you here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, well, I'm absolutely delighted you managed to find a quiet spot at the high-level meeting. Delighted to welcome you to this live hangout. Hopefully, we've got thousands of people around Africa and elsewhere listening to this. We've had a good chat so far, Stephen, but if you're happy to take over the question and discussions from now on, I'm very happy to disappear into the background and leave you to it. Are you okay with that? Hello?
I'm okay now. Hello, I'm okay now.
Okay, well, please take over, Stephen, and have a good time with Patson.
Thank you. Hello everyone. My name is Stephen Machua, and I'm happy to host this chat. I'll be hosting Patson Malisa. He is the president of Organization of African Youth. He's based in South Africa. I will be, deliberating with him about the ongoing high-level meeting on global partnership for effective development cooperation, where he's a delegate and a speaker. Welcome, Patson.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so may you start by introducing yourself, saying what you do and why you are in Nairobi at this particular time.
Just a second, Stephen. We've been chatting for about 25 minutes now. Patson has introduced himself, and basically we've gone through parts of the discussions. I think we were starting to move more towards effective implementation of the SDGs in rural Africa, and we're going to try and start discussing about what the high-level forum can do, and then carry on about discussing what our initiative about, how we can tie the two in, maybe what yourself and Patson can do while they're at the high-level forum to actually make this initiative become practically realistic on the ground, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that
I think Stephen's got problems tying up with us,
Yeah.
which is a shame. If it becomes available again, I will let him take charge of the discussions. But just to keep things moving along, I think we were starting to explore the idea that we've already agreed that the high-level meeting is not a waste of time. We've agreed that positive actions will come out of it. Patson has already told us about initiative that he wants to instigate. I guess we can be skeptical and think that a lot of discussion takes place at these meetings, but do positive actions come out of them? So I guess just to follow on from what you just said, Patson, how can we ensure that positive actions do come out of this particular forum, and obviously and specifically for the initiative that we're concerned about?
I think this is a very fundamental question, a question that speaks to the crux of the matter with regards to government relations with the people. And this is because of the fact that whether it's youth or civil society in general, there seems to be a disconnect between government and the people. So whenever you hear of government interacting with private entities, there's always that to and fro of words and loads of contention, because whilst civil society is very passionate about what they want to see happen, government has to think about they have to think about what it would do their neighboring partners to look a certain way or act a certain way and things like that. And there seems to be no how can I call it? There's no Stephen seems to be back online, as I can hear. Yeah, there we go. As there seems to be this disconnect between understanding one another and why we're passionate about what we're passionate about. I can speak from a place of having interacted with both, and I've gotten to a point where I understand why bureaucracy is the way that it is. And at the same time, I understand why civil society is the way that it is, because I'm originally from civil society. And what needs to happen now is there needs to be a bridge built where, you know, we look past some of the very ailing modes of communication that we've had over the past few years. It seems like as if we fail to meet each other halfway. And I think it's necessary now more than ever because of the fact that we have embarked on a very ambitious program with the SDGs. And for the sake of that program, sometimes we have to swallow our pride, swallow our own way of thinking, and look towards the other person's point of view and find a way to meet them. In fact, I can lean from the lessons learned through the father of my nation, President Mandela. He actually made everyone who was with him in Robben Island learn the language Afrikaans. And the reason why he did that, he said that when we get out of here and we go and we negotiate with them, we need to be able to speak to them in their language. We need them to understand us in their context. And this is something that I think civil society as well as government needs to do. There needs to be an understanding of each other's language. Why is it that we will go and we will say, no, this is undiplomatic, or things like that, you know, within that framework? Or why would we then feel the need to express ourselves from the point of civil society? And it's very necessary that honest discussion about this, because again, the system that we're inheriting was created and developed within a closed circuit because of the fact that they wanted to make sure that world wars do not happen ever again. But now we have to use this mechanism to do something much more than just peacekeeping. This has to talk to the very essence of culture and the essence of how things are done. So it's going to take quite a while, but it's going to need people who are going to be less sympathetic and less conclusive about how things are going. You know, let's look at it as marriage. You know, you don't simply break up because you had one fight. You know, you know, you fight and then you come back and you talk about it until you make it work. You know, and unfortunately, in this instance, we cannot afford a divorce because we are tied by nature. So we're going to have to make it work somehow.
Interesting that you comparing civil society and the government getting together as marriage.
I think you know who's the woman there.
I mean, just to be simple here, can you give me an example of what you're talking about why it's not been successful? Just maybe from your own country or just from your knowledge of anywhere in Africa, why sometimes the discourse isn't successful, and how best the discourse, what is the best process for a successful discourse to take place?
I can give you a very good example, a very recent one, which was yesterday's HLM Youth Forum, where 80% of the contributions, I can literally say 80%, was simple complaining and apathy, you know. And when you write down in a document simple complaints and apathy, and you present it to government will tell you, well, we know this. We've even written a report about this, you know. So the question is, what's the solution? And that's one of the reasons why there's a failure in that regard. And this is something that civil society needs to take up. And another problem, again, is government seems to also enter these meetings with a preconceived idea of what civil society can and cannot do. In fact, I was speaking with a bureaucrat about the speech I was going to give yesterday. I gave him the script, and he says to me, this will not be good for civil society? And he says, because it sounds too bureaucratic. And I say to him, but no. At the end of the day, civil society are policymakers, they are decision makers, and they need to hear things as it is. You know, we can't smother them with all these slogans and chants and things like that and expect things to change. We need civil society to be familiarized with the system. And hence I gave the presentation that I did in the way and manner that I did. And I think that we need more people who are willing to engage with civil society that way. It's the only way that we can create that unique bond that is necessary to make SDGs work.
Are you sort of almost suggesting like a middleman between the government and civil society? Like a marriage guidance counselor, if you like, that tries to actually bring the two together?
Yes, actually, that's one of the things that I feel my role, especially here at HLM, is going to be, because in the ministerial meeting on Thursday, which will be the only plenary session that they will have with regards to addressing women and youth issues, I'm the only youth on the panel. So I'm going to have to approach that particular topic as a middleman. And I'm going to say some things that youth will not like, and I'm going to say some things that government will not like. That's the whole idea behind being a bridge. But at the end of the day, the success will be in them being able to see each other in a different light. And hopefully we can have more people who can see things like that and who aren't afraid to find themselves on the wrong end of people's opinions and perceptions.
Are you saying I'm not a youth, Patson?
Paul, you're always young in my eyes. You are as young as can be.
I've never grown.
Might say different though.
I've never grown up. That's my problem anyway. So
yeah. No.
So let's just try and move to our initiative, the empowerment of rural communities. Oh, Stephen, hello. Stephen's racing around different areas of Nairobi at the HLM2, trying to find a nice quiet spot. He's going to be very fit as a result of this, I think, but he doesn't seem to be having much success in getting a good internet connection. So apologies to everyone who are hoping to hear a conversation between Stephen and Patson, not myself, but we will press on, and I hope you're enjoying the discussion so far. Just to let everybody know who is listening, the NAID SDGs initiative was started as a result of leading youths engaged in rural community development getting together on the 2nd of January this year to try and explore a way of building the rural communities, helping them to meet the SDG targets of 15 years' time. And NAID has members mostly who work in rural communities. They are at the front end of the development issues, and the United Nations have identified that rural community development in Africa is probably the weakest link to the success of the Sustainable Development Goals in 14 years' time. So our initiative was born, and over the last 10 months, it's been a roller coaster ride, to be honest. But especially trying to organise a workshop, we've had issues with that. But I think we've made very good progress. We've now formed an alliance with African Union chapter, who Patson has set up. African Union chapter are focused on Agenda 23, Agenda 63, and there's no doubt there is a very important link between Agenda 30, the Sustainable Development Goals, and Agenda 63. The two are vitally connected, and we actually hope to have a workshop to discuss the linkages, but also specifically the SDGs and Agenda 63, and try and formulate a program for the next year. Now, NAID SDGs has teams operating in most countries in Africa, and we hope by the time of the workshop, every single country in Africa will be representative. These teams are basically of 7 or so key mixed gender individuals who are active in rural community development, and the program we're trying to pursue is encouraging these core teams to develop much wider stakeholder networks with local government, and as Patson suggested, with private enterprises, with the communities themselves, basically developing a strong stakeholder network to be in a good position to help, we say empower the rural communities, but it's also to help the SDGs implemented in these rural communities. And we have great expectations as an initiative for this high-level forum being held in Nairobi. So Patson, how do you think our initiative can be helped in any way by what is going on in Nairobi?
I'm sure there's going to be an outcome document that is going to be put out, upon which young people will be given an opportunity to engage with government with regards to how to both access funding and also engage with them. One of the other things that we have been advocating for here at the forum is for the partnership to develop a youth indicator. Now, this youth indicator must measure the mainstreaming of youth within the planning, implementation, as well as the monitoring and evaluation processes of the implementation of SDGs. Another thing that I'd like to stress about SDGs is that it is a political program. It has been designed by diplomats. So in order for us to achieve it, it must have politicians involved. And civil society also must be involved, because at the end of the day, we're the ones who go to the ballot, we're the ones who vote, we're the ones who have to pay our taxes, and we're the ones who have to have the report back given to us. So it'll be essential for us to create a mechanism through NAID that can be used to help both the formulation of this indicator as well as engagement going further with regards to how to help monitor and collect data with regards to this, because Article 57 of the United Nations Declaration on Sustainable Development, which was released last year, noted that there was very insufficient data with regards to baseline indicators on sustainable development across the world, and called for mechanisms to be put in place to help governments to collect this data. And I think the Network of African Youths for Development, considering the grassroots impact that is there, especially from an African perspective, can add tremendous value in that regard. We can also add value in terms of helping to educate the masses with regards to what does it mean to be part of sustainable development. And also, what does it mean to be part of sustainable development, and what does it mean to be a part of engaging with government with regards to that? Is it just a matter of saying that we don't have this or that? Or is it a matter of also coming up with ideas and coming up with initiatives where you can say, instead of allocating the budget to this and that this year, why not put 5% to this or 10% to that? You know, these practical matters don't seem to be very popular within the populace, especially with regards to rural areas. And it'll be essential for us to engage in that regard. And NAID is a very amazing tool for that to be implemented through.
Thanks, Patson. We, as you know, we have been pushing our contacts at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and other contacts we have within UNDESA for some simple guidelines to how we actually do benchmark and monitor sustainable development process along the 17 indicators in rural communities. And despite lots of head banging, we still don't have that information. Our teams need that information so that they can actually start feeding the data to local governments and national governments. Is it possible while you are in Nairobi that you can actually identify key stakeholders and try and drill it into their heads that this information is absolutely critical for our teams to make progress?
Most definitely. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. One of the things about development is that if it cannot be measured and it cannot be monitored, then it's basically useless. It's just another piece of paper. And I think we need to move it from just being that. And in order for us to do that, we need to know what exactly it is we are monitoring. So as you have said, I will definitely be engaging with quite a few and make sure to track both to you as well as the Network of African Youths for Development in that regard. That's my commitment to you in this regard.
Well, thank you very much for that commitment and all the other commitments you're making, Patson, to NAID and to Africa's development. One of the questions I've got down here, which really is, I suppose, part of this, but I want to, now you've said there's too much moaning and groaning about government progress, but in some ways we do have to moan and groan about government progress, but we have to be maybe a bit more diplomatic in the way that it's approached. But as you know, there is a voluntary review of the SDGs by governments in individual countries. And I don't think all the African governments have actually committed to these voluntary reviews. So I guess it's a two-part question. How can we get these governments to be part of this process? And then how can we be involved in the reports when they are submitted by the governments? How can civil society engage with them?
I think it's really a matter of just relationship. Relationship is so important. You never engage openly with someone you do not trust, and it's really a trust factor. The Global Partnerships 2016 report actually noted that only 47% of governments actually engage local government as well as private stakeholders in the assessment of monitoring frameworks, and only 44% make the results available to the public. And of course, this again comes back to relationship. Sometimes governments, because of the volatility of democracy, knowing that if you make one wrong move, you can be voted out or you can be protested out within a matter of days, makes it very difficult to want to be accountable. And I think one of the other very bad issues is that success and development also has a ripple effect that creates more problems. And as a result of that, you will find that governments end up being criticized for having been successful in the first place. So reporting becomes then very difficult for many of these entities. So once again, we really have to build a bridge. I know I sound way too optimistic and way too friendly to government right now, but at this moment, especially with my generation where we are now, we really cannot afford to go another 10 years having the type of relationship we've had with government over the past few years. It's just not going to work, considering the state of the economy, considering the state of peace and security around the world. We need a new lease on life. And someone is going to have to come to the forefront and then say, here, this is for the sake of humanity. It's not even about getting the next civil society organization out in the open. This is about getting the next generation in a much better opportunity to make the most out of their lives than what we have right now. And even if it means that we have to, shake hands with the devil, as Kofi Annan said, we might have to do that sometimes. And there are leaders within this generation who are willing to do that for the sake of moving this agenda forward. And I really hope that we can have more people like that come to the forefront.
So we're talking about more positive collaboration between civil society and governments. But in my mind, I can't see why each African government should make easily available, say, a listing of the SDGs and the progress that has been made, and then and the issues that have been faced, possibly, and then for civil society to engage positively with them, with this open information, and as you say, not be negative about it and not complain about why they've done more, but to actually look at it positively and say, look, we want to help. We want to help develop the SDGs better, in our case, in rural communities. This is to do. And the government will respond saying, yes, we think that's a good idea, or more like, well, this is our approach to it. And by encouraging that sort of discourse, that agreement or collaboration will be reached and progress will be made. Is that the way, maybe one way you see it progressing?
Most definitely. One of the other things that we must also consider is that government and nations are a going concern. So whether we are here or whether we're not here, whether we live or whether we die, whether we engage or whether we disengage, the government, the country still remains, no matter who's in power. So we need to then understand that something is going to happen, whether it's positive or negative, and somehow we must find ourselves, we must make the decision of whether we want to be engaged or whether we want to be disengaged. If we want to engage, we're going to have to develop relationships. And of course, it's not always going to work out. That's life, and you're dealing with human beings. Simply because we do our risk analysis and our forecasts on the charts and everything like that doesn't mean that our plans are bulletproof. There are unexpected circumstances that will always come up because of how nature is, and we should just make the decision that no matter what, we will keep on going. I think that is a very stable way to look at things. If we are constantly trying to look from an overthrowing perspective, the question is, where do we then draw the line between sticking it out and letting the horse die, so to say?
Yes, so what we're talking about is a much more positive approach from civil society to the government, but the government should obviously also, in that case, engage in an equally positive approach to civil society. So that would work, but you can understand the frustration of a lot of our rural community activists. You saw the picture, for instance, of for our Energy Globe application, the issues that our teams face actually just reaching the rural communities, and then when they get to the rural communities, having to then start the building process with them. So you cannot actually understand. But I suppose this process is felt throughout, not just by our teams, but also by local and national governments. I mean, which national government would not want their country to be a successful economy? So it's common sense, really, for anybody in government, that they would want their country to be a great country to live in. So it makes sense in many ways that this collaboration takes place. Well, we've taken a lot of your time up, Patson, and I know you'll be wanting to prepare for other meetings that you have throughout today and tomorrow as well. But do you have any closing remarks, any summaries, anything you'd like to say before we leave?
Thank you very much, Paul. And it was actually a very great pleasure to have been engaging with you today. And in closing, I would just like to motivate the youth leaders out there that, you know, we even though the task is difficult, it is still possible, and we need to keep on going. If there's anything that we could do that would be an injustice to the generation that's coming after us, is to be apathetic and lose hope. Let's also remember where we're coming from. Let's speak in an African context. At some point in time, development was not even an issue that could be addressed within an African context, because Africans were segregated and marginalized, and they were told that the only hope for you was to simply be a hewer of wood and a drawer of water. But now we have an opportunity to make the most out of that, and let's look at it for what it is and appreciate where we've come from and move forward with the same determination that brought us here in the first place. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for giving us your valuable time to take part in this discussion today. My apologies again to everybody who was hoping to hear from Stephen, but unfortunately he couldn't actually get a good internet connection. Thank goodness Patson did manage to get a good internet connection. Those of you who've listened to these hangouts before know we've had enormous problems with connectivity. So thank you for your patience for listening today. We hope you've actually gained something out of it. And this process is ongoing. Patson is fighting for our corner in Nairobi. We're determined that we're going to have our workshop to progress our initiative, and I just to conclude, very grateful for this discussion taking place today. So on behalf of the Network of African Youth for Development, thank you for listening, and keep in touch with us, because there will be follow-up hangouts in the near future. So goodbye for now.